You know what it is. That's right. It's time to talk money with your money nerd and financial coach. Now, tighten those purse strings and open those ears. It's the Money Talk with Tiff podcast.
Hey, welcome to Tiffany's Take, where I answer your money questions right here on the podcast. If you want your questions answered on the podcast, just go to www.moneytalkwitht.com/ask Tiffany. So for today, I wanted to discuss personal branding because I feel like this is really looked over as it relates to how we operate in both corporate and or not even corporate, just in our work settings or in our, if we have our own business in those settings as well. And this is something that I teach to my freshman students at the university I teach at, is just to kind of consider your personal brand. And I thought, this is something that not only students need to hear, but also people already established in their careers. Your personal brand is everything. So let's talk about what personal branding is. So first and foremost, personal branding is all about how you market yourself to the world. It's your unique combination of skills, experiences, personality, all of that that sets you apart from others in your industry or in your field. So a strong personal brand can open doors to new opportunities, help you build a network of valuable connections, and even position you as an expert in your field. So a lot of people look at me and they're like, oh, Tiffany, Money Talk with Tiff, that brand is great. I've heard about it, blah, blah, blah. But Money Talk with Tiff wouldn't exist if I didn't have a great personal brand as well. And so personal branding is really just how you put yourself out there to the world. So what are some key things that you can think about or start doing in order to create a strong personal brand? So first, you want to make sure that you define what your unique value proposition is. What is it that you're trying to convey to the world? Think about what sets you apart from others and how you can communicate that to your target audience, whether that is, your manager or your recruiter or your audience. If you have your own business, if you're a content creator, maybe your audience or your target market. So this might include things like your expertise, your skills, your values, even your personal story. And I feel like that is one of the things that has solidified my brand, is that I'm very personal. I tell my personal stories, not just the wins, but the struggles as well. And people really appreciate that. So for me, my personal brand, if you look at my company values, it aligns with my personal values. Authenticity, being bold, things of that nature. And so everything aligns, right? Another thing is you want to make sure that you create a consistent and cohesive brand across all of your platforms. So your social media profiles, your resume, website, blog, all of those things, you want to make sure that your messaging, your visuals, your tone are all aligned. So to give you a great example of where this kind of went wrong in my career is I was working at a job, and we were talking about, going out, having fun, if we were going to meet up at a bar, whatever. And so I said, oh, there's this bar that I really like downtown Greensboro. And so they were like, well, let's look it up. So they go to the Facebook page, and lo and behold, there goes Tiffany right as the cover image. So quite naturally, I was mortified. And also, these are my new coworkers, and they're like, oh, well, Tiffany likes to party. She's on the front page, that type of thing. Gratefully, they did not think of me like that. That was just the story that I was telling myself. But luckily, I had a strong personal brand elsewhere and otherwise that they were able to realize that, oh, she was just out having fun. It's not like that she does this all the time. And so luckily I had other things out there, like all the good work that I'm doing, my blog. At that time, I didn't have the podcast, but I did have the blog, them even interacting with me in person, all of that stuff spoke the same language. So even having that anomaly out there of me on the dance floor, did not put a bad taste in their mouth. But could you imagine if that was out there along with a lot of other things that kind of told that same story? Then now my personal brand, not saying that it's bad, but my personal brand would be, oh, Tiffany likes to party. She's always going out to party. She's always, drinking, having fun, whatever, acting a fool, that type of thing. But there was nothing else out there that backed that story up. So all of that to say, you want to you can't help what stories people create for you, but you can help them navigate to the story that you want them to have. And so that's all a part of personal branding. Another thing I will add as far as creating a strong personal brand is to stay active, whether that's on social media, engaging with others in the community, developing your skills and knowledge. Remember that your personal brand is an ongoing project, and that project requires effort and attention. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind as well. So how do you promote your personal brand? So if you are at a job, one thing that I always did with every job that I worked is making sure that I keep a record of all the things that I've done for that particular employer. And how did that play a role? That helped me establish my personal brand as someone that's a go-getter, that does whatever needs to be done, that is working on the best interests of the business. And when it came time for, promotion talks, or it came time for raises, I would pull that information and present it, because that's one thing I feel a lot of people miss is when it comes time for your yearly evaluations, brag on yourself, because it's going to be impossible for them to remember everything that you did or even the highlights that you did when they have a whole team that they're worried about. And so you want to make sure that you keep those records and you keep track of all the things that you've done that help the company, so that way you can get the max raise that you deserve. Also, I will say that has helped me in being a business owner as well. I keep track of all of the things that I'm featured in. I keep track of all the testimonials that I get from my customers, so on and so forth. That helps me establish my brand as an authority, both my personal brand and my business brand. So think about that. You want to make sure that you are active, you're showing up. When you show up, you're being an asset. You're not being the person that people are like, oh my gosh, here such and such comes, that's a brand. You know what I'm saying? And when I talk about this to my students, I'm like, you don't want to be the person that nobody wants to associate with. You don't want to establish that as your brand, because then it'll hinder you. So you want your brand to be reflective of your true personality, reflective of your values and what that looks like. Now, don't get me wrong. If you want that to be your brand, if you want to be the Dwight of the office, then by all means. But it's completely up to you. And, you definitely need to think about how you are portraying yourself to other people. I'm not saying to, overly care about what other people think of you, because I don't. But what I am saying is to be intentional with how you put yourself out there so it reflects who you are as an individual or who you are as a company. Okay. So as you're thinking about these, things as you advance in your career, as you advance as a business, make sure that you know who you are. What are your values? What's important to you? What are your goals? And then portray that in a way where people can understand it and know where you stand, know where you're trying to go, know how you operate. And that also can help you establish your personal brand. there's so much that I can get into when it comes to this, but I just wanted to give you a quick high-level overview of personal branding and how that can help you in your career, in your life, and how important it is, really. Your personal brand is everything. Your name is everything. So make sure that you do it justice. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode today. If you have a question that you want me to answer on the podcast, feel free to go to www.moneytalkwitht.com/ask Tiffany, and I'll be more than happy to answer for you. So hopefully you're getting your personal brand under control, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening, joining, and being a part of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast this week. You can check Tiff out every Thursday for a new Money Talk podcast. But if you just can't wait until next week, you can listen to previous podcast episodes at moneytalkwitht.com or follow Tiff on all social media platforms at Money Talk with T. Until next time, spend wise by spending less than you make. A word to the money wise is always sufficient.